Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I'm Subpartu. Joining me today is the one, the only, the Axie Steve.
Hello, I am Axie.
Yep. It's like he got that name when he just started like swimming in pools of Axe body spray. Yep, Axie.
Yeah, I was gonna say that maybe that would be a good like Star Wars universe version of my name.
Maybe I could see it. I don't know. Baxie's kind of Star Warsy enough to me. It is.
Is it? Maybe.
It's the X. You don't get a lot of X's in the English language, so.
That's fair. Yeah. Although Steve is kind of the worst Star Wars name. This is your new Jedi Master. What's his name? Steve.
Lord Vader, I'm sending you on a mission to capture the last remaining Jedi. What is his name, my master? Steve. Okay, anyway, Jedi Master Steve Baxie, what are we discussing today?
Today, we're talking about Dracula. Kind of generally, vaguely, I didn't really have like a particular version I had in mind or like any specific notion. Like, it's not about the book, it's not about the movie necessarily, it's not about anime, just kind of in general Dracula-ness.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Dracula is one of those interesting characters where there's been like thousands of versions of him, and I don't think I'm exaggerating.
No, there's countless versions of Dracula. There is no definitive Dracula.
Really? I think that might be fair, though I think a lot of people would argue Bela Lugosi.
Well, see, okay, the thing with Dracula is it's a lot like what happened with Danny Ketch Ghost Rider versus Johnny Blaze Ghost Rider, where they're like, well, Johnny Blaze is the best Ghost Rider, but anything you think of that you like about Ghost Rider tends to come from Danny Ketch. So, like, so much of Dracula's mythology is not in the original book, and Bela Lugosi is certainly one of the best Draculas, but a lot of the stuff we think about that is Dracula or that has that aesthetic and stuff comes later with Christopher Lee or is more in line with the book or maybe even comes later when we got that Gary Oldman movie. Like, Dracula's history is just so fluid. I don't think at any one point in time we ever have a definitive Dracula.
Okay, that's fair. Maybe Bela Lugosi's the most iconic Dracula, then.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, he's my favorite Dracula, maybe, actor-wise.
Nah, you make fun of me for it every time, but I'm gonna stick to my guns. I love the guy from Van Helsing. You make fun of me. You make fun of me for it every time, but I love his performance as Dracula. He was so much fun to watch, and he just was so... like, he knew he was the bad guy, and he loved that about himself.
I mean, that's fair.
I love that about that Dracula. He was just so in love with himself, and there's just so many great lines. Like, I will always adore him, his wives, like, embracing him and everything. It was like, we lost the other wife. And he's like, don't worry, I'll get a new wife. And like that's just the perfect Dracula line to me. I adore that line.
I mean, as far as cartoon cutout superhero movie versions of Dracula goes, he's a head and shoulders better than the one in Blade Trinity.
Definitely. Oh my god, easily.
Yeah. So yeah, I will definitely give you that. I love watching that movie, so I won't like argue with it really.
Yeah. Dracula's just one of those things where like there's so many different ways to do him, but there are some really consistent things. And I will say, I know, like, you know, it's funny, you and I quite enjoyed Dracula Untold, unlike everybody else.
Yep.
That is like my one exception, but I never liked Dracula to be the hero of a story.
I have no problems with Dracula being sympathetic, but yeah, I agree with you. I don't want him to be the hero.
Yeah, like Dracula Untold, it works because everyone's the hero, everyone justifies their actions, and you can easily make the argument of, you know, Road to Hell is paved with good intentions, right?
Yeah.
For that movie. And like I totally buy that he becomes a vampire for love. That makes perfect sense to me. After that, I don't care. He should just be perfectly aware of how he is now evil.
Well, he kind of like so that movie is weird. Where like I feel like the first half of it really understands that, and then it stops getting that and just turns him into a superhero. Because he starts doing sort of evil things and stuff and acting more sinister after he becomes a vampire, and then they just kind of abandon that.
Yeah, it's a little all over the place. I don't know. We'll see what happens with it. It's like that said, it's not in that universe anymore, but I don't think they've re-announced Dracula yet. At least I haven't paid attention to that stuff, so I don't know.
They might Incredible Hulk it where like it's there, but we're gonna act like nothing from it matters.
Yeah, except for just like randomly referencing Harlem or something.
Yeah, basically, maybe borrow an actor here or there, but like don't pretend like the movie doesn't exist.
Yeah. Anyway, so like I don't know. I don't like Dracula to be the hero of a story, and of course I say that, but I can't think of anything besides Dracula Untold, which I do like. So I don't know. I'm trying to think of other stuff that portrays Dracula as like the good guy or whatever.
So it's a weird, right? Where like Dracula as a good guy seems wrong, but like vampires as heroes or protagonists really doesn't. The closest I can think of where like Dracula is the hero is Helsing. Because Alucard is Dracula, and he is not only the protagonist but also the good guy. Because he's killing Nazis. He's a vampire killing Nazis. But that spectrum is really skewed, and he's not a good person at all. Like, he's sinister as fuck and will torture the hell out of people he's fighting. But he is on the right side.
Gotcha.
So that gets a little sticky.
Okay. And it's just weird to try to think about that, because something about Dracula to me is just so intrinsically, you know, horrific, right? It's that idea of just that lingering, disgusting, you know, monster in the shadows kind of thing. Milan always made this point whenever we talked about vampires or horror or anything, and it is just a really fantastic point, which is what killed the vampire? Knowing how to kill a vampire. What made monsters scary was they were just out there and in the unknown, and you didn't know anything about them, and they're just like these horrible things that would ravish and kill you. And we took that away with like the whole scientific advancement and that kind of presenting itself in art through science fiction, where like every problem has a solution through human ingenuity.
Yeah.
And like that really took away a lot of Dracula's teeth.
Vampire puns.
Yeah, that was a good one. Excuse me while I pat myself on the back. No, but like it's just interesting to see like how that has changed the character, because you go back to Bram Stoker's Dracula, and that's what it's all about, is like, how the fuck do we deal with this? And like Van Helsing in that book goes through like all these different very scientific approaches for how to cure Lucy, and then when that like all fails, he takes that research and starts applying it to when Mina gets infected. And he treats vampirism like a disease, and that's really, really interesting. But like it's so weird that Dracula like kind of begins the modern idea of the monster, and yet in his original story we have the modern thing that starts to kill the monster, which is science killing the monster.
Yeah.
I don't know where I was going with that, but just something I thought I'd get into.
Yeah, no, I mean, I see what you're going with there generally. It's weird because vampires they've been all over culture lately, but I can't think of an example of us doing vampires lately and it's meant to be a horror context. Or like...
What was that one where like the vampires took over the whole world?
I don't even know. Was that a zombie movie?
No, it was a vampire movie where like they were running the whole world. Like everybody on Earth was basically a vampire.
Yeah, I don't remember that. But like even then, like it's not like a monster movie in the same way other horror movies are. Like we don't. Okay, it's like vampires become a genre separate from horror movies now.
Yeah, the only other vampire, like, proper horror movie I can think of is 30 Days of Night.
Yeah, but that's been a while now, hasn't it? It's been at least 10 years.
Shit, I'm getting old.
Yeah, I remember that was coming out in theaters, I think.
Yeah, me too. That's probably, like, what, 2006, 2007? Damn.
Yeah, no, it's been a while since that movie. And they've been talking about a sequel for that for years.
Mm-hmm. No, but, like, yeah, you're right. That we have not done anything with vampires as, like, a proper horror villain for a while, and I think the thing to blame for that is Twilight. And so, we really are due for a proper Dracula movie again that, like, really fucking gets it, you know?
Well, see, this is why, and this is probably where the topic comes from, but this is why I was so excited with the Netflix Castlevania show. Because Castlevania, it's not a video game franchise I've, like, ever played, but I love the mythology of it. Mm-hmm. And so the Netflix show, it's torture because it literally only released 4 episodes, and the 4 episode basically covers everything up to the tutorial of that game, so they're not even really into the story yet. But the premise for that, in the game that they adapt, is the third Castlevania game, and it's essentially that there's a woman who goes to Dracula's castle, and Dracula is a scientist. Like, he's still our brooding, dark, gothic Count Dracula, but, like, he has vast knowledge of science and this massive library and stuff. And then the super seditious town doesn't want to believe in any of that, so the woman goes up to Dracula's castle and starts learning things from him, and they fall in love. Then, like, years down the line, she leaves the castle, and the people of the town burn her as a witch. So Dracula seals off the town, summons his army, and starts murdering everyone.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I saw that. You're right, it is really good. Fucking brutal as shit, which was nice. But yeah, that played Dracula as a sympathetic character, but he still is committing a monstrous act, which is a really great way to set things up.
And I mean, it's smart to open with it to make it seem like Dracula is going to be our perspective into it, and then shift out of that almost immediately.
Yeah, definitely. I thought that was really cool. And it's just like, it is just harsh and brutal and scary. Like, I love the scene where all the monsters come into the church, and just there's that one that's talking to the bishop. That was fucking awesome.
Oh, I love that, where he's like, God's not protecting you.
Yeah, we love you, though, because you brought us into the world.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I can't fucking wait for that next season of that.
Oh, yeah, that looks legit. But yeah, that like, and I want it because I want more Dracula. I want more of that Dracula. I want more of his pathos, and I swear to God, if they just show up and Dracula just like starts fighting them without any kind of conversation with his son, oh, I'll be pissed.
Yeah.
Because that was really, really fucking kick-ass. Funny,
yeah, I'm excited to see how that goes.
Funny story about Castlevania that has nothing to do with anything. But, like, I think it was, like, the first or second Castlevania game. I was over at a friend's house, and some guy, like, one of his older brother's friends was playing it. And he's on the last level fighting Dracula as Alucard or whoever. And Dracula's like, chased my balls of hellfire, and, like, balls of fire just start raining down on the screen everywhere. And the guy playing the game goes, taste my leaping kick! Because this is like his 5th time doing the boss fight. And so he's just jumping around on the screen with a fucking sword laying all over the place. That's the only exposure I've ever had to Castlevania gameplay, and it's just always stuck with me.
Yeah, from what I've watched, it doesn't look like the most fun to play. It seems like it'd be like grueling and make you want to break a controller, but that's why I watch and read instead of play.
Nice. Trying to think of other really good Dracula stuff, because we did a whole review of the fucking movie, the Coppola movie.
Yeah.
And I still don't think that's a very good movie. Are you a fan of the original novel or no? Do you generally like it or no?
I really like it, but okay, so to be fair, I have a read on the novel that I feel like makes it brilliant, but the people who think it's brilliant would completely disagree with me.
Okay.
Which is that, like, so I've never written this paper, but it's always been in the back of my mind, which is Foucault has this premise that, like, the 1800s and 1700s, that whole culture that built Dracula was not a time of sexual repression, it was a time of extreme sexual freedom. And I always thought Dracula was kind of about that. I always thought Dracula was about, well, it's not that sex is being repressed. It's that by stopping our ability to talk about it, it makes everything in sex permissible. And that's kind of what Dracula as a metaphor is supposed to be. Where, like, it's this weird monster that sex becomes when you literally make it unrestrained.
Interesting. And, like, I've always been very much of the interpretation that Dracula is the, psyche striking back at, sexual repression by just being, like, that kind of overreaction of being bottled up emotion. But with what you're saying, with the idea that, like, removing sex from public conversation means that people felt more at liberty to just do anything and not have to worry about it, or not have to worry about being judged for it. Kind of, I can kind of see where you come from, because then that allowed some, like, particularly disturbing things to take root. So I can see where you come from.
Especially when you look at, like, the long-term effects and, like, the specific stuff, where, like, Arabian Night is a big subplot in the movie, but also in the book, and that's entirely about really bizarre sex practices and stuff. And then now when you look at, like, more critical cultural criticisms, people have particularly on the left, people have a very hard time arguing about porn. Because, like, feminists will go back and forth about, like, well, no, we should defend prostitution and pornography and stuff like that. But then some of them will be like, well, why are we in such a rush to come to the defense of these weird institutions that are almost inherently sexist? And all of it just goes back to, well, it's because we're not comfortable talking about sex. So, like, we just want to push these debates out of the way.
Yeah, because the Victorian age and the idea that you should be ashamed of your body and all that stuff.
Exactly. You are ashamed of it in public, and because of that, you do whatever the fuck you want when you're under the covers at home.
Yeah, and I do think Dracula is a pretty good example of that, where it's just like this raw and animalistic and just unnerving, unnatural feeling, and I think he's a pretty good metaphor for that. So, yeah, I wouldn't say that your interpretation is off. It's just coming from a slightly different perspective.
Which is fair, yeah.
Yeah, like, I did a presentation on the Dracula novel in high school, and I was so giddy about this because this was how mature I was. I got to say the words, so Dracula makes Mina his whore, as sexual repression being taken down by sexual frustration. That is what this is a metaphor for. And I was just so giddy that I got to say whore in class.
Oh, that's the best feeling.
Right.
Out of curiosity, do you have like a favorite Dracula movie or property or interpretation or something?
Like really solid version of him, because
or just
again,
like
my favorite,
like if you just think about Dracula, what's the thing you want to go to with Dracula most?
My go-to thing is Van Helsing, but I don't think that's a very particularly good interpretation of Dracula.
That's fair.
After watching it, I'm kind of leaning to the remake of Nosferatu a little bit.
See, I was going to say Nosferatu also, which is weird.
Like, maybe it's just because we watched it kind of recently, but that was a pretty weird, creepy take, and I kind of enjoyed that. It's hard not to like the Coppola movie on some level, even though I do think that's a pretty bad movie, and just in the fact that it's a lie, right?
Because it's not Bram Stoker.
Yeah. There might actually be a way to cut that movie to make it good. I would say that. I think there's enough really solid there that you could maybe cut that movie and make it good. I mean, you're still always going to have to deal with Keanu Reeves' awful British accent, but I still feel like you can cut enough of the, like, what the fuck is going on out of that movie and make it pretty solid.
Every time I ever have an argument with someone and I bring up the point, well, Keanu Reeves is actually a good actor, it's very hard to get out of the wormhole of but Dracula.
Yeah. Yeah, because I imagine most people would probably just go for Bill and Ted, but Dracula's a pretty good bear trap right there.
How do you feel about what is it now? It's called A Horror of Dracula, but that wasn't its original title. It's the 58 movie. It's the one with Christopher Lee.
See, I'm terrible. I've not seen a lot of the, like, classics in so long. Like, I remember one Halloween, or one October, more aptly, I got really into wanting to see all those, but I was, like, second grade, maybe? And
Gotcha.
I still didn't get to see all of them. I only got to see, like, 3 or 4 of those classic movies because my mom wouldn't let me watch them, but my dad would. And I only got to see them when I was over at his house for the weekends.
I gotcha. Okay. No, I was just curious because that one's got Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee in it, and it's directed by Terrence Fisher. So, like, it's a big powerhouse kind of movie, but, like, I feel like most people have forgotten about it.
Yeah, it's one of the Hammer movies, right?
It is a Hammer movie, yeah.
Yeah, I really want to see the Hammer horrors. I've just never gotten around to them. I saw a lot of the old Universal ones. Like, I was obsessed with the Wolfman for a while, so I saw, the original Universal Wolfman at one point. But I do want to go back and see some of the Hammers, because I've heard great things about the Hammer movies. Yeah,
the Hammer movies are a really interesting kind of move away from what Universal was, because I feel like the Universal movies, they're scary, but they're scary in a charming way, where, like, you can see something disturbing and kind of laugh at it and enjoy it. The Hammer movies try and go more for that sort of gut reaction, and it makes them really loose as far as the writing goes, but really memorable as far as, like, the presentation and directing and stuff goes. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like that very natural transition from, like, making 30s and 40s movies to making 60s, 70s, 80s movies.
Gotcha. And like that I've heard good things about, but no, I don't have a ton of background on Christopher Lee. You said Bela Lugosi's your favorite, though.
As far as an actor goes, yeah, I love Bela Lugosi as Dracula. I saw that movie a lot when I was a kid. I didn't watch a lot of, like, Universal monster movies. I still haven't seen most of them, but, like, the original 31 Dracula I've seen dozens of times.
Okay. What's your
it's just one of my favorite things at this point.
Okay. What would you say captures the character the best that you've seen?
Captures the character the best. See, that's tough because like Dracula's weird. Where I feel like even in the original novel, he's a very particular version, and I feel like he's not fully formed there, even though that's where he comes from.
Well, like, and that's an interesting question because he's been reinterpreted and redone so many ways. I don't even think you need like something to be close to the novel to truly capture the character, right?
Exactly.
I feel like there's a popular perception of Dracula that just exists independent of any one source.
Yeah. So like, so when I think of Dracula, when I think of like the very particular things that make Dracula who he is in my head, I think I come closer to something like the '58 movie with Christopher Lee. Because like I love Bela Lugosi, but like that was a 1930s movie. It wasn't very gothic. It wasn't very bloody. It looked a lot cheaper. Like it didn't have the same sort of like atmosphere that you could build later, and that's not to any fault of it. But like when I think Dracula, I think more of like that really famous picture of Christopher Lee smiling with the teeth and blood all over him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If you could do Christopher Lee's Dracula in the style of the original Nosferatu, that would be the perfect Dracula movie.
Okay, interesting. How do you feel about the way we've started to make Dracula's origin more sympathetic? Do you like a more sympathetic origin for Dracula, or do you like the idea that he was just kind of always evil? Like, because we've had the whole Dracula Untold thing where like he gives it up for love, and you know we've gotten a number of versions that kind of go for that, a similar background. But then we've got this other thing where like we really tie him to Vlad the Impaler and all this other stuff.
Yeah. So I think it's a better move to make Dracula's origin more sympathetic. Because like we do one of two things. We do a thing where we talk about Dracula's origin, make him sympathetic, and then turn him into a monster, or we do a thing where he was a monster and then sympathetically becomes a good person later. So like it's the difference between like Castlevania and Hellsing, just because those are the two things on my head. I like the sympathetic origin, because Dracula in my mind is a very proud person. He's very egotistical in a very particular way. And I think a sympathetic origin is important to that because on some level it makes Dracula a more interesting character, both to watch and for an actor to play, if it's someone that goes from something that's deeply personal and humiliating to something deeply flamboyant and egotistical.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I just think that works better. Like there's an image in Helsing that always sticks with me where Van Helsing has defeated Dracula, and Dracula's just laying on the ground, being forced to call this guy his master now. Like something about that's really unsettling.
Mm-hmm. And like for me, I kind of like the sympathetic thing that we went for in Dracula Untold. There is something really attractive about that, especially the way that they dealt with, PTSD. Just as like a somewhat of a character trait where he's like, I am a monster. And then the vampire tells him, you have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah. That
was really cool. I don't know why people hate that movie. There's some nice stuff in it.
It's a flawed movie. It's not good, but there's so much good in it.
Yeah, definitely. So I don't know, man. There's some stuff where like I really do like the idea of making him sympathetic. At the same time, I really, really like the one in Van Helsing, and I can never imagine that dude ever being sympathetic.
There's an episode of Buffy. Literally, the first episode of Buffy season 5 is Buffy versus Dracula. That's what it's called. And Dracula shows up, and he's basically a cartoon, and it's hysterical. Where like at the end when Buffy kills him, like you fade for credits, but then the dust comes back and he's alive again, and Buffy's still standing there and stabs him again. And she's like, "Don't you think I watch your movies?" It's fantastic.
That's funny because they did that exact same joke in Agents of Shield's first season.
Oh, did they? Oh, they did, didn't they?
Yeah, that's pretty funny. Okay. Well, let me just ask you one last thing about the Van Helsing movie. What did you think of the idea of, like, Dracula trying to birth children and just the mythology surrounding that movie? Because to me, that was probably the most unique idea they've ever had for a Dracula-like plot.
Yeah.
And I think that was a really strong thing.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Because, I mean, for me, vampires are entirely about sex. So, like, the very natural extension to that would be something closer to, like, children or birth or something like that. So, like, that's really cool. I love the whole sort of almost mad scientist Frankenstein aspect to Dracula in that movie, where, like, he's very clearly piecing things together. And I wish we did more of that. I feel like the vampire metaphor kind of gets stagnant, and doing something along those lines would be more interesting, where, like, it's more than just turning everyone into the world into a vampire or something.
Yeah, I like that. And, like, I thought it was a really interesting way to, like, blend the whole, you know, Universal monsters together.
Yeah.
Like, I thought that was a really good way to introduce the Frankenstein mythos and really build it in well to the Dracula stuff.
Yeah, Castlevania, Alucard, as that show develops and from the games and stuff, Alucard has a really interesting perspective on a lot of this because he's half human. But I'm excited to see how the Netflix show handles that, because there's a really long-lasting relationship between him and his dad, but then also the Belmont family, which ancestrally, like, kills vampires and kills monsters. And I don't know how much of that they're sticking to for the show, but the more so the better, because the whole notion that Alucard is both kind of an asshole vampire, but still has some semblance of, like, gothic honor that comes from his dad is fascinating.
Yeah, I think he's still got a stupid name.
He does.
Alucard. Like, it just reminds me of the joke from Scrubs, where JD kept, like, working to make a film called Dr. Acula. Like, that's all that I think of when I hear the name Alucard.
Oh, now that you mention that, though, the Batman versus Dracula is a hugely underrated movie.
Oh, definitely. I totally agree.
It's so good.
Yeah, that was an awesome movie. Oh, that was so much fun.
Especially the scene where Bruce Wayne has to write out Alucard and put it in front of a mirror to know that it's Dracula spelled backwards.
Come on, Bruce Wayne. World's greatest detective. Come on.
He did it in the middle of a party and everything. He couldn't wait. He had to confirm this.
Yeah, that's a little much.
I do kind of love it, though. Batman vs. Dracula is one of my favorite things. It's so good.
I'm echoing just a bit, Steve.
Oh, sorry.
All right. I think I'm good. I think I'm pretty good on this one. Let's go ahead and go on to recommends. For me, I've talked about it a number of times. Obviously, the original novel I think is really, really strong and a great critique of Victorian culture. Right at the end of Victorian culture, the Van Helsing movie is hella fun, and for what it's worth, Dracula Untold's a decent flick. It's pretty decent popcorn, all things considered, in my opinion. So there'd be my three. How about you?
So Helsing would be the first thing that comes to me. The Helsing Ultimate stuff, not necessarily the original anime. The 58 Dracula movie, as opposed to the 31 one, just because I feel like at this point most people have probably already seen that. Or if not, they're familiar with it at least, and the 58 one seems to kind of be getting weeded out as time goes on. And let's see. And maybe the Nosferatu remake.
Okay.
I like the original Nosferatu a lot. That's one of my favorite movies of all time, but I feel like the remake's it's really interesting to see that whole world in color. And Werner Herzog's got a really good style, even if he was kind of a dick of a director.
Yeah. And he has a fun name to say. So
He does. Go back and watch that video. That video entirely exists because I wanted to say Werner Herzog a lot.
you could have just like made a video where you just said Werner Herzog until you got that out of your system, right?
But
you
that
have
would
your
have
own
been
YouTube channel.
dumb.
Oh, right. That would have been dumb.
That would have been dumb. But making you review a 2-hour movie, no, that's smart.
Nice. Glad to know what value my time has to you. Oh
I
my.
regret nothing.
Okay. Let's see here. Next time. Fuck it, I'm in a mood. Next week's gonna have a theme. We're gonna talk about Black Panther T'Challa.
Yay! I love Black Panther.
Yeah, man. Next week we're gonna be reviewing a Black Panther fan film. I'm gonna be reviewing a Black Panther comic during comic reviews. We're gonna be talking about T'Challa. It's happening. Yeah. All right, everyone. Thanks very much for watching. Until next time, I'm the Philosopher.
And I'm the Exile.
And we are your geeky gentlemen, and we will be discussing things.